I feel like I say the same exact thing when I start videos, but hey guys! So I'm back today with another video for you guys about college. Yeah! I decided today I would make a video about how I made my college list, and maybe talking about my experience of making my college list will help you craft your own. I have a whole page full of notes with bullet points for you guys and tips, so I hope you guys enjoy this. Let's get into it. So just a little background about me and my college process. I only ended up applying to 4 schools total because I ended up getting into my early decision school, so that was it for my whole college application journey. But I did have a set list of colleges that I was going to apply to even before I knew about my early decisions. So I did have a rhyme and reason to why I applied to these 4 specific schools in the early round, and I'll get to that later. So the first step I really took in this whole college application journey for me honestly started pretty late. It started in the spring of junior year because I personally didn't really think about colleges and applications and where I was gonna apply for the entirety of high school. To be honest, I didn't even know that Penn was a school until sophomore year, nor did I know that it was an Ivy League until probably early junior year. That probably tells you how clueless I was. And also realize I'm not even an international student. I live in Korea right now, but I lived in the US for my entire life since I was 4 years old. So I should have known, but I didn't somehow. So since I didn't know that much about colleges, I did need some sort of guidance for where to look, what I should consider. And so that first step honestly started with my college counselor. I had my first meeting with him in April of junior year. We just talked about what I wanted in a college. Honestly, I didn't even know how to answer that question in the beginning. And honestly, my college counselor didn't really help me with a lot of things during my process, but this is the one thing he did right for me. And so my college counselor asked me a lot of basic questions of what I wanted at college, and he crafted a generalized college list for me to look at. And one of the biggest things that I found important for my whole college application was financial aid. I'm not the most well-off person by far from my school at least, so I knew I would need a significant amount of financial aid from wherever I go to be able to attend there. So this whole financial barrier just kicked out a lot of colleges to begin with for me. Basically all of the UC schools. I didn't apply obviously because of the early round, but I never planned on applying to any UC schools anyways because they're kind of notoriously known for having really shitty financial aid for out-of-state students. Even though going to college in California sounds wonderful, I would love to do that, but that was not in the cards for me. So after a few days, I got an email from my college counselor with a list of, I'd say 20 to 30 colleges. I can list them off here. So that was the basic college list he gave me. And so one tip I would really highly recommend for you guys is I wouldn't apply to more than at most 12 schools. I feel you need to look at college admissions and the results you get as kind of a graph, where on the x-axis it's the number of colleges you apply to, and on the y-axis is the quality of those applications. So if this is quality, it goes pshoo. By no means was my college counselor telling me to apply to all of these 30 schools. That does not make sense. And also, I just didn't have the money for that because for every application, I was spending $70 if you count all my subject tests and my ACT scores. So that was a lot for me, and I was not about that at all. And also, this might have been more specific to me, and this might not be the best advice for you guys, but personally, I didn't and I still don't really know exactly what I want to major in. I liked and was pretty good at my STEM classes, so I just chose engineering kind of on a whim. And since I wasn't exactly rock solid on my choice, I didn't want to pick a college solely based on the rankings for my major. I didn't want to go to a college that environmentally was just not my fit and socially was not my fit, but just go there for the major and then ending up wanting to change my major. And if that school didn't have great rankings in that major, then I'm unhappy on both spectrums of my social life or just life in general, and also my academics. The overall rankings, the US News, played a decent role in where I applied to because obviously those are the schools that are just well known, the first ones I was going to look at and consider for putting on my college list. And so with that said, when I was making my college list, I was very heavily focused on looking at the overall college environment of that school and deciding whether I think I would be a good fit there. And I realized looking back on my past that my mood highly determined my outlook towards school and just my productivity and focus on school. So I knew that if I was going to do well academically at a school, I would have to be happy. And studying isn't fun and exciting for many people. So if I can't even be excited about the people there and what the school has to offer besides academics, and I knew if I wasn't happy with my environment and struggling with my academics, then I would burn out very quickly and not be in a good place, in a good mindset. And so that's why I focused really heavily on, the non-academic side of colleges. So the first thing I looked out for in making my college list was the location of the school. It's also a big reason I decided to ED to Penn, which might not be the best reason, but it was a reason and I have no regrets. I knew I wanted to go to a semi-normal college town. I didn't want to be on either side of the spectrum of being like right smack dab in the middle of a city, Columbia. But I also knew that I didn't want to be on the total opposite side of the spectrum where I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods, Cornell and Dartmouth. So yeah, those schools were kind of like off my list right away because I knew I didn't want to go there. And I felt like college life within a college town was a pretty unique experience that one person can have in their life. And I don't think it's easy to get that experience aside from college, in like real adult life. That's why I didn't want to go to a really urban school like Columbia, because I heard that college life isn't very developed and it's more based on just the city and what the city has to offer. I guess I still wanted that kind of bond of being surrounded by college students, and that's why schools like NYU and Columbia was like not my thing. But then on the other side of that, Cornell and Dartmouth, they're literally in the middle of nowhere. I'm not even the most extroverted person. I also like having my alone time, but like I could not survive in the middle of nowhere. Even if I don't go out that much, I still like having the option to go out. I feel like once that option is taken away from me, then like I wanted more. And I will say, in terms of location, I didn't go on almost any college visits. The only college I visited was U of M, and that's because my aunt is a professor there and I stayed at her house for spring break, and so I just had free time and I was able to like go around campus and look around. And honestly, I knew kind of right off the bat, as soon as I knew about Penn, that I wanted to ED there and that's where I want to go. And the next checkpoint that I had of crafting my college list was the size of the school. So I knew I wanted to go to a big school, or at least like a decently sized school. And this is because I went to a pretty small or like mid-sized high school. It was like 200 people per grade and I knew everyone there, and I did really like the sense of community the school was able to foster. But also I felt somewhat restricted sometimes because since I knew everyone, I felt limited in the new friendships or just like new experiences I could have within that school. And I felt like going to a big school would give me more opportunities to, meet new people even in like junior and senior year. And I'm really excited about that because I don't like normalcy that much. And also, a big school inherently has a more diverse pool of people. I feel like that would give me a greater chance of meeting people that I really click with. And the last reason that I really want to go to a big school was because bigger schools usually have a more diverse array of resources because they have a bigger fund. And then the next thing that I really factored into what colleges I was going to apply to was whether it was a private or public school. And the first point is, although a lot of public universities like UCLA and University of Michigan rank really well in those national university rankings, I'm not saying that they're bad schools, they're amazing schools, but I would say that I found that they do lack a little more in terms of resources and personalized attention that they can give to their students just because of sheer size of the school. And I think this can manifest in a lot of different forms, like class sizes and also personalized advising for your college courses and helping you find internships and mental health support. And in my opinion, a lot of public schools lack a little more in those areas than private schools, like Ivy Leagues or Stanford or Northwestern or like those kinds of schools, if that makes sense. And I know this is a broad generalizations, but I'm saying that I find that a lot of public schools are like this. I'm not saying all public schools are like this. And also another reason why I tried to stray away from public schools was because of their financial aid. Just overall looking across the board, public schools do not do the best in terms of financial aid for students, especially if you're out of state. Now, I went to high school in Michigan and I lived in Michigan for like a decade. So I applied to MSU and University of Michigan, which were both state schools, because I would have qualified for in-state and I would have been able to afford it pretty easily. But for other public schools, like I said, the UC system, or like is NYU a public school? If it's not, disregard NYU, but they're really great schools, but they give really shitty financial aid to out-of-state students like me. And so even if I did get in, I probably wouldn't be able to attend, and that just would have been a waste of my application fee. In terms of private schools, on the other hand, I found that especially, the top tier schools like top 20, top 30 private schools, they do have a very large endowment, so they have the funds to give out as financial aid, and really good financial aid. If you guys didn't know already, I'm going to Penn in the fall, and I am paying less than I would have if I went to the University of Michigan or Michigan State as an in-state student. I don't know if it's right to tell you guys how much I'm paying for college next year, but I will say I am paying probably less than $6,000 or $7,000 for a whole year at a college. And then the next thing I considered was the name value. I know this kind of sounds superficial and surface level, but if we're being frank here, name value does have value in the real world in terms of what jobs you can make, the alumni network that you have access to, also just the opportunities that kind of open up to you when you go to a certain college. And this is particularly heavy in certain sectors like business and finance. And since I'm not entirely set on what major I want, that also played a big role in why I applied to Penn, because so many of their majors and so many of their schools were really well developed, especially in the business schools. So I knew that if I would end up wanting to pursue business, I would have that option there. For me, name value had less to do with bragging rights of telling people oh, I go to the Ivy League school. It was more about the doors and the opportunities that it would open up for me in the future when I would try to get a job. But also, with that said, name value also played a part in the schools that I wasn't going to apply in. And this is not advice. This is just me telling you what I did and what was going on in my mind. I decided I would kick off Harvard and Yale off my college list right away. I didn't even really look into the schools, and this might sound stupid, and it might have been a stupid decision. First of all, I didn't really like the stereotype that was associated with people who go to Harvard and Yale, especially as a Asian person. In Asian culture and in Korean culture, there's this overwhelming stereotype where, you're a kid, what you should strive for and what your ultimate goal is to go to Harvard or Yale. I just really didn't like those stereotypes, and it really put me off. So a lot of times in my childhood, I kind of wanted to stray from that stereotype in a way, not being overly quiet and all these other things. So I think this was part of my internal rejection of those stereotypes and internalized rebellion against these Asian stereotypes that I always grew up with. And so I felt like if I applied to Harvard and Yale, not saying that I would have gotten in, I 99.999% would have not gotten in, but I'm saying on the off chance that I did get in there and I did go to Harvard and Yale, I didn't like the idea of being further stereotyped by people I don't even know, and also by family back in Korea. And then finally, after I had this general list of colleges that I want to apply to, I really focused in on what schools I was going to apply in the regular round and in the early round. I think applying early can be very strategic. I carefully chose what colleges I was going to apply to early and not. The way I did it and the way I would recommend to other people and my friends, in your early round, I would apply to 3 schools at least. I wouldn't apply to more than 4 or 5. The first one I would apply to is your dream school. Usually if it's a really good school, they have restricted early action or they have early decision. So if you have a school that you're really set on and that you want to go to, I would apply early because it will give you a higher chance of getting into that school, since that shows the admissions officers that that is where you want to be and you are giving up applying early to all these other schools. So I think that's really good and showing demonstrated interest. And also keep in mind, applying to 3 colleges for early round is more geared towards people who want to save money and for people who don't have the funds to apply to, you know, like 10 schools in the early round. And so I would apply to one target school in the early round. My target school was University of Michigan, especially because I went to a high school where we had connections to the University of Michigan, and a lot of people in my grade had a higher chance of getting in than if I went to a public school in Michigan. And then I would apply to one safety school, and I applied to MSU because it was also in-state, and I knew that if all else failed and if I didn't get into my top schools, I would probably end up going to MSU since it would be the cheapest for me. Also, I would say, since like, you know, these safety, target, reach schools, they're more of like a spectrum. There's no like hard category you can put each of these colleges into. I would apply to the higher end of that category for early rounds, because if you get into that one safety school in the early round, you can basically get rid of all the other safety schools that you had on your college list. Same with your target school. If you get into that target school in the early round and it is on the higher end of being in your target range, then you can get rid of all the other target schools on your list, and that way you'll have less applications to fill out in the regular round and you will be able to save a lot of money. And I personally ended up applying to one more school in the early round. I applied to Case Western because, one, there was no supplemental essays that I had to write, so all I had to submit was the Common App, and so that was pretty easy for me. And second of all, I felt like this was kind of in the mid-range between U of M and MSU, so I thought if I applied there and I got in, then I would be able to scratch off a lot more colleges. And so yeah, that's what I did, and those are the tips I have for you guys who are still kind of determining what colleges you want to or you don't want to apply to. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I will be posting more videos. I'm trying to post weekly and I'm on the track of that right now. And also, I think I'm going to make a video about how to go through the whole financial aid process for next week's video, or at least in the near future, so look out for that. And also, if you have any questions for me or you just want to say anything or talk to me, please comment down below and I will respond to like 99% of all the comments. Hope you guys have a really good day and hope your college journey goes well if you are a senior or a junior. Bye guys!